Hello, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, welcome, welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
So great to see you. Thank you for coming.
Yes, welcome to community-wide conversation on disability and ableism and access. I'm going to put two links into the chat. One is our agenda, and also one where we would like you to introduce yourselves on by writing in the Word doc, or if you want to introduce yourself into the chat, that is fine as well. So we'll give you that option. And once again, this is community-wide conversation on disability, ableism, and access. My name is Professor Derek Stadler from the library. I'm the web services librarian. And Dushana?
Hi, my name is Dushana Podlutska. I teach psychology. I'm in the social science department. Thank you for coming.
And hi, I'm Priscilla Stadler. No relation to Derek. It's just a coincidence. Although we do call each other long lost cousins, but we're really colleagues and just happen to share the same last name. And I work with the LaGuardia Center for Teaching and Learning. And I also want to say we're happy today to have our two sign language interpreters with us, Sarah and Susan, who can introduce themselves to you if they would like to.
I'm Sarah.
Welcome.
Welcome.
I'm Susan.
Hi, Susan.
Hi there. Okay, so we were going to have everybody introduce themselves, but it looks like we're way over 30 people. And if we did that, I think we would run out of time. So maybe we'll just discuss briefly the three questions that we're going to cover on the topics of disability, ableism, and access. And then we're going to break into breakout rooms in a few moments. But Priscilla is just going to quickly go over the three questions that we're going to, each group is going to discuss.
And we also want to encourage you, because we don't have time to go around and do a verbal introduction today as much as we would like to. Since we only have 45 minutes, we would still like to know who you are. So if you would like to share with us in the chat your name, your role at the college, and perhaps where you're located, either you can share that in the chat with us, or we also have a Google Doc for everyone if that's easier for you. So Derek just put the link to sign in, and we invite you to do that. So because we do have a large group and issues of access, disability, what does it mean to be someone that's a student at the college that's learning? What does it mean to be someone that's working at the college? What does it mean to be a teacher at this college? Dealing with issues of access to our learning materials, to our work environment, to how we interact with each other, treat each other. My colleagues, Dushana and Derek and I know that some of you here are very interested in these issues. So we wanted to really just connect with other people who are also interested here. And we thought that it might be good to have smaller groups to be able to do this. And we're going to have three different questions. So each of the groups is going to take a question to focus on, but then we'll come back together and hear from the groups. The three questions that we came up with are, what does accessibility mean to you? what is it like to be a LaGuardia student, faculty, or staff member with a disability? And we are asking that question whether or not you identify as somebody with a disability. And then the third question is, what is ableism? What does that word ableism mean, and why does it matter? So even if you're in a group that's not discussing the exact question that you want to discuss, you can raise your concerns and questions. That's fine. We just wanted to give it a little bit of structure to get started. So Derek is going to assign us to random groups, but before we do that, we want to make sure that every person who wants sign language interpretation is in the same group with the interpreters. So Derek, do you want to keep a list of who, because the groups are going to be random, but he's then going to place people in the groups with interpreters if needed.
Yeah, if you can put your name into the chat, preferably the name that you are using on your on Zoom right now. If you could put that into the chat, and this way I can see whether or not you would like the interpreter in your room. One of the rooms, okay, so a hello before, right? When you were introducing yourself.
Yeah,
okay, so just one person, right? Okay.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye. Enjoy.
Thanks, Derek.
Okay.
I have a.
If I may interrupt for 1 second, is there anybody here that needs to be in the interpreter room? Anybody? Going once? Going twice? Okay, bye-bye.
There it is.
Right. So to actually have right.
Hello, everybody. I am back. Can everybody hear me? All right, I think we're all set now. Sorry for the confusion, but we weren't anticipating this many people. We originally had 6 people signed up, and it's a pleasure that we have everybody here, but it was a little hard to get everything done in Zoom, especially when you have to move people around to different rooms. But I want to get started with our discussion. I know this discussion isn't really very long. We're only here for a certain amount of time. Okay. Okay, but I think everybody is here that's supposed to be here. Okay, so what we're going to discuss here is what accessibility means to you, and I'm going to try to give everybody a little bit of a chance to speak. But I guess I'll go first just to kind of get things started. Accessibility, I'm going to take a little bit of some definition of it, what I think it, or what it means to me, I should say. Accessibility is the concept that we need to provide an environment in both the physical and virtual world that is approachable, obtainable, or attainable. We as a community can alter an environment to enhance the individual's probability to participate in that environment in a way that is meaningful to the individual. So thinking about my first experiences of accessibility, I go back to kindergarten, where I saw for the first time a left-handed scissor that was used for students that were left-handed. And I always think about that. That was my first introduction to accessibility. Now, as the web services librarian, I have a lot of other things that I focus on accessibility. And just to actually name a few: video accessibility, making sure that videos have closed captioning, ensuring that documents are accessible. There's also web accessibility. There's spatial accessibility in the physical world. And there's also a safe space. And we can go into intersectionality about this as well. But some of the challenges, I think, are sometimes people aren't aware of accessibility concerns. But we're trying to build that here, awareness, and we're trying to build a movement. And we want to support equity and inclusion for all of our students and the community at LaGuardia. Enough of me talking. I want to hear from you guys. What does accessibility mean to you? And I'm going to take a few short notes as well. So feel free to jump in.
Well, I'll start.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, sure. I think for me as a faculty, what comes to mind is how do I make my classroom space welcoming and inclusive, right? So that every person feels that what I'm trying to do in the classroom reaches them, that there isn't anything that I'm offering that is hard for them, for any student to reach. I think for me, what feels challenging is, right, being very honest, I have never really formally been taught to really think about how to make my classroom open and available for different types of learners and for different individuals who have various challenges or just simply differences. And this is something I'm really just coming into now. I really feel like an ingenue because I feel like I have to redo everything that I've been doing, rethink everything that I've been doing, because I, historically have not been intentional about, like, is even the way I create my syllabus, is that accessible? Like, what does it mean for someone who's visually impaired? What does it mean for a student who is learns differently? Perhaps someone who is more of a visual learner, and this dense text on materials that I hand out. So, for me, yes, the classroom and creating a space and a way of teaching where everyone feels that they are on par with others, and that everyone's getting the same thing, but it may be differently. But how do I do that is really my question. So inclusion is key for me, making creating that equity space that no one feels more advantaged than the other. I know I'm nowhere near that, but I'm so open to learning more.
Okay, thank you. All right, does anybody else want to tackle what does accessibility mean to you?
Gregor is raising his hand.
Okay, I didn't see that. Okay, go right ahead.
Well, I think the bigger question also is, what would accessibility be? I think it means providing, being aware, and I mean, we can't always provide everything immediately, but if you notice that a person is in your room and maybe deer in the headlights look or feeling awkward, you find out you have a deaf person in your class, or whatever the case may be, then being open to figuring out what that accessibility would be. Because all of us in this room, we're all people, we can share our ideas and maybe just say, what can I do that would make this more accessible to you? And then that person could answer, well, I would like interpreters, or whatever the case may be. So it's normal for people to not always know what to do and what to provide. So I think we just have to present the problem and then come up with a solution together. We can't solve every problem, but we can, if we communicate needs, then we can start to provide a solution for that specific problem.
Okay, thank you.
John Collins is raising his hand,
Okay, John Collins.
and he's saying, for a lot of deaf people, they struggle with the issue of disability. Sometimes it's language access, but within the deaf community, that access is already there. So we have to think now about sort of an extra burden that we are saddled with and what's going to be done about that. But sometimes when we walk into a room or into a space, it's already there. And that means that the space is accessible to us.
Okay, thank you. All right, anybody else like to,
Can I just add on to
Yes.
something that I said, and I don't want to take up too much space, but I really appreciate what both Gregor and John stated, but this is the problem that I'm having. You know, if something is accessible, a class is accessible, right, then, right, part of me feels like in theory, a student shouldn't have to ask for something extra. And you know, because the class is accessible, right? It's available to everyone and everyone can get what they need. And, you know, again, intuitively, I get it that, right, if I have a singular deaf student or visually impaired student, that student may need to request support. But again, I keep going back to, so all of this is grounded upon, right, the typical classroom does not have students that look like that with those experiences. So we're creating a classroom for, you know, what maybe historically we've considered as traditional students. But how do we expand what we do in the classroom so that it is available to everyone? That's the question that I have. And that's what I
Hey.
want to look at.
Okay. So once again, I know we had some people join. What does accessibility mean to you is what we're discussing. So does anybody else want to tackle that?
No, I'll say something.
Sure, Virginia.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. So, you know, I'm an occupational therapist. So the idea of accessibility and adaptation and finding ways to address the needs of the individual within a group is something that, you know, we are constantly doing as occupational therapy practitioners. So when I think of accessibility, I think of how can I create an environment, create materials that support participation across the classroom. So while I'm looking at individual needs, does a student need additional time for something? Do they need an interpreter? Do they need materials presented in a different way? All of those accessibility needs are at the root of my goal of having every student or every person that is in that group be able to participate. So that's how I think about accessibility. How do I support participation in what we would call the occupation of education? So it sounds a little bit, wordy there, but that how do I create an environment where it's safe to ask for help? And also, how do I consider individual needs to support the whole group moving forward?
Okay, thank you. And Patricia? Patricia
I
had a
think
hand raised.
Maureen,
Oh,
yeah, Maureen.
were you first? Okay.
Maureen was before me, yeah.
Okay, go right. I'm sorry. Go right ahead, Maureen.
Just unmuting here.
Okay.
So I increasingly am focused on universal design because I myself am very familiar with people who don't necessarily identify their disabilities to the world. And because of that, I'm conscious of wanting to make sure that both the visible and the invisible disabilities in the room. In other words, all of us, everyone, benefits from good design. And I am nowhere near having perfect design, but it's a process for me of striving to do that. And I rely sometimes, I get feedback from my students when things aren't working, and I appreciate that. And that helps me to be better at doing this thing. But so for me, like, it's accessibility is a human right. It's universal. It's just is. So that's my two cents on the topic.
Yeah, and the perfect design is even more difficult when we're remote, obviously, to get that perfect. I know in the class that I teach out of the library, we're fully online, and just trying to make a video or trying to make everything accessible can be challenging at times. All right, Patricia?
I agree with what was said about accessibility. Some of the accessibility is easier to understand and to do. The challenge, accessible interpreters, making the documents readable. You did a workshop on that. Fantastic, all that we can do. I'm more concerned about what Maureen was saying is the differences that are not visible. And how am I supposed to get to that? How am I supposed to know that I am going to address everybody who is in the classroom and make the content accessible? So the definition of accessibility, I think, is really broad in terms of what does it mean that the content of the course, not just the physical course itself, but the content is accessible. And that to me is the biggest challenge.
Okay, thank you. Lucy?
Yeah, hi Derek, hi everybody. Great to
Hi, Lucy.
join in on that. I had the honor of working with Clarence Chan for the Middle States report on equity, where we looked at accessibility. And we chose to interview 3 people in terms of IT, so technology, physical space, and then learning spaces. So we interviewed Priscilla, and we learned so much. And I think a big takeaway from that was how in each of these areas, people are trying to identify barriers and how to remove them. And sometimes those barriers are real, they're physical. Sometimes they're invisible. Sometimes they're in our heads. They're myths or attitudes that we've grown up with, that the institution perpetuates, that we're just not aware of. And so I think, just to connect with Maureen, it's going towards universal design, because if we design for, if we remove a barrier, other people will benefit. I think one other thing is that it's really about flipping who has knowledge. People who have encountered a barrier have a lot of knowledge. And so it's helping the institution be receptive to that, to really questioning things we think are settled, that are really not settled. And so that's a big change, I think.
Okay, thank you. Very true. I like that line. If we remove barriers, everyone will benefit. I think that is so true. In all, even going outside of accessibility, we have so many barriers in our worlds that's a conversation for a different discussion. But does anybody else have anything else to say about our definition? Technically, we were supposed to go back to the main room at 4, but I'm holding off because I know we started a minute or 2 later. But does anybody else want to say anything else about accessibility? I know I wrote down some notes that I'm going to share in the main room. And if you'd like to share in the main room as well, once we hear from what was discussed at the other, I'm going to put those other, I'm sorry?
John has his hand up.
Okay. Yes, John.
So
Yes.
I want to talk about what accessibility means. Whoops. Hang on 1 second. The interpreter's having a little problem with her screen. Just 1 moment. Why is it not letting me remove the pen? Damn it. Hang on just 1 second. Okay, there we go. Go ahead. So going back to what accessibility means, I want to talk about that a little bit, but I also want to add what is not accessible. So I don't have a student perspective. I have a faculty perspective. And one of the barriers for someone who is staff or faculty here, that many times there are ad hoc meetings that take place. You know, short, maybe quick 2-3 minute meetings. People agree or discuss something really briefly and then go about their business. The problem for me in terms of accessibility with that kind of meeting is I need an interpreter. So therefore, I don't have access to those kinds of short ad hoc meetings, you know, where ideas are exchanged or people come to a consensus about some issue or an agreement and then go on. I can't access that information. And so I'm left out, as it were. So that's something to also think about from a different perspective, you know, from the perspective of faculty and staff. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yes, that is very true as well. Sometimes, I see that some former colleagues who have, physical, your needs that they have, your mobility issues, even when they, come to, like, let's say LaGuardia, sometimes, they can't access a certain room, or maybe sometimes the elevators are down, there's so many different, things involved. But just so we know, we are going back to the main room in 12 seconds. So any last things to say? All right. Great conversation. I want to thank you all for this group. We're going to go now to the main group. Okay. Welcome back, everybody. I think we're all coming back to the main room. I'm sorry I had to cut us off, but we went a little over. I figured we should go a little over because we had started a little late. So I just want to share a few things that we discussed. One thing that a couple of things that we talked about. And the one phrase that I liked is, if we remove barriers, everyone will benefit. Some of the other focuses that we had is striving to create that perfect design in the classroom to address everybody's needs. Is the content accessible? And how can we create this environment? And just one last thing that I have a note of. One student said, accessibility to me is having the resources that we can use within school, whether it's for disabilities, mental health, and having a space that we can all go to and use to create a more inclusive environment. So those are some of the things that we talked about in the what does accessibility mean to you? And now I'll turn it over to one of my co-facilitators. Jump right in.
I can jump in. So we had a really great discussion about a lot of different things, including working with Building and Grounds to create accommodations for a student from the health, that was Renee from the Health Center spoke about that. Faculty spoke about meeting individually with students who identify as having a disability to find out more specifically about what they need, because the letter that just offers more time to accommodate students is really not necessarily enough if you want to effectively help students meet their needs for learning. We talked about how that's kind of a standard letter, and while that's helpful, it would also be helpful to have more options and more information available.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Hi, it's Astrid. How are
Hi,
you?
Astrid. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Astrid Niebles. I'm with the Office for Students, which is, oh, now it's called the Office of Accessibility. Sorry, it takes me a little bit of time to remember the change of name. Just to kind of remind everyone that asking students for specific information is, you need to be very careful if that happens. Because one of the things that happens within higher education is the idea of confidential information. And even when we meet with students in our office, that information is limited to just a few of us. Not all of our part-time staffers, not everyone is aware of the student's diagnosis or disabilities. So it is, I think, prudent to just maybe contact the director, Johnny Nelson, if you do have any questions regarding that next step. We totally understand that it's based on your desire to help the student, absolutely. But there is always that gray area that we always have to be careful with. So just my thought, just my thoughts about working with this department for over 25 years and the experiences that I've had at the college with students.
Thank you, Astrid. That's really important. And we do, of course, want to respect students' right to privacy. And I do want to say that in our group, that was also raised, that we want to have that respect, as well as figure out how we can, collaborate with students whenever appropriate, and with the office when appropriate, to meet their needs as directly as possible, but always respecting their privacy. So thank you for raising that, though, Astrid, so clearly. Appreciate it. Yeah, and so I don't know if anyone else in our group wants to. Oh, can I say one more thing, which is we had a professor who teaches design, industrial design, and she talked about the knowledge of that field and how it's related to universal design, and perhaps we can team up. We have so many people here today, and I think it's one of those it takes a village type situations. So it was really great to hear her put out there that they have knowledge and skills to share with us as a community. So, Dushana?
Sorry, so I assume as our group, also other two groups just ran out of time because we had so much to discuss. But if I had to kind of say, to put everything that we discussed somehow touches upon depathologizing disability, right? And how we all need to contribute to it. And I like this event, however short it is, that we are here, staff, students, and faculty discussing this. I'm very happy to see Professor Bing, who is on President, what is it called? Advisory Council for Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity and Inclusion. And as you may know, that there is a search for a director for DEI on campus, and that President Adams is personally invested in promoting DEI. So these are all good signs. But what we discussed was, ableism, and how that we need to challenge the hegemony of normalcy, right? Normativity of normalcy. That disability is simply integral part of human diversity, just like any other kinds of diversity. That we need to value lived experiences of people with disabilities, and precisely mentioned, right, that for instance in design, like people with disabilities are incredibly contributed to design significantly because of their experiences, and contributed like so enormously. And Adela made an important comment about when coming, right, transferring to remote learning, that actually members of that many people with disabilities were so much ahead of many of us, right? Because they are so proficient in using already technology. So while for some students, right, or people with disabilities, remote learning kind of presents challenges. Again, we have a lot to learn from others who've been using technology already. So these are just few themes that we discussed. But I, again, personally, this is kind of also my motto as a faculty: working together, right? So whether we try to promote diversity, create more accessible classrooms, promote inclusion, that it's impossible to just do, right, that faculty do it on their own, but everything needs to be done in collaboration with students. So to create inclusion, I believe that really inclusive classroom environment can be created only when it's done in collaboration with students. And of course, if institution also allows for that. Thank you. And I don't know if I just want to invite other members of our small group if they would add something.
So I'm just going to jump in for a minute, but I'm not part of your the group that you're talking about. So I was looking at Lucy McNair. I was looking at your question, and I think that when certain large spaces are created, or I'm not really sure what the right word is. My colleague Chris could also talk about that because he was on the library space committee. That disability requirements are necessary, and I believe they are required. So for example, our chief librarian who passed away, he was in a wheelchair, and I believe that he had all accessibility in the library in terms of, office, elevator, and, restroom and so on. And I think that, they're always looking at the library, our shelves, our aisles, everything, our bathrooms, all have to be, accessible. So I think that sometimes, and even our classrooms, we have, wheelchair accessibility in our classrooms, the one classroom that we do have where the table goes up and down, and we have that throughout the library. So I think that the college does address it, but I'm not sure how much of it is connected to all classrooms. And if there's a way that if a student has a disability, if they can then, if it could be somehow noted in like registrar, and then maybe a classroom that is more accessible in terms of restrooms and whatever that person might need might be easier to get. So those are my thoughts. And I work in the library, and so does Chris and Philip.
So
And Ian, I see Ian here too.
Priscilla, if I would just jump in for a second, it's Astrid again. So in terms of physical classroom spaces and even moving classrooms to other buildings, actually there is a process in place. The student, when they come to us, we do identify what those needs are. And if there is a need to move a classroom because of barriers or just travel from the C building to the M building or anything that needs to be accommodated for because of the ADA, it is done. We put in a request through the registrar's office. So again, it has to do with the students' request, because some students will request some things and others won't. So we do have a process already in place, and it is mandatory that those ADA requirements are met by the college. So yes, we do it. So the student comes in, they identify what those needs are. We put in the request through the registrars if it's to move a classroom, or we coordinate with other areas, depending on what that need might be. Just as a personal note, I have been with LaGuardia as a disabled person using a wheelchair all of my life. LaGuardia, in terms of CUNY, I have been at other CUNY campuses. And I can assure you that from my personal experiences, I won't talk for everyone else, but for me, LaGuardia does a really good job to try to address a lot of these concerns. I've had a situation in another CUNY campus, I won't say which one, where unfortunately the bathroom was not accessible. And in order for me to use that bathroom, the person that was leading the workshop or the meeting that day had to call a member of public safety to stand outside the bathroom to guard it so I can use it private as a private. Exactly. I see you. Yes, Alex. So it was again, LaGuardia does a really good job trying to address a lot of these issues. Can we do better? Of course. I think we can all achieve to do better. But LaGuardia, from my personal experience, does try to address these issues.
Okay, Gregor is next.
Thank you, Astrid.
Yeah, Gregor is next, I think, right? Okay, Gregor. You're muted. The interpreter is muted. Yeah.
The interpreter's aware of that just now.
Okay, all right. Sorry.
All right. So I want to just remind everyone here that when you're talking about accessibility, we need to be a bit sensitive in terms of personal activities and other things happen. We can't, we have to work in a unified way and what's going to be the best for everyone, and to make sure that we're actively doing it and we're not just talking about it. It needs to be a serious effort, and to talk about what will happen going forward, and sort of now, as we are here now, to become leaders for people who will come after us, and to agree to really start working and improving on these things. And that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Justin, I think is next, or did anybody else have their hand up that I missed?
1 second. I've just.
Did anybody
Sarah,
else have?
Sarah, can you get Justin?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, for me, because I'm a deaf person, maybe people aren't always aware of that, but I do still need accessibility at LaGuardia too. I need closed captions. And there are other things we need. We need people to be aware of deaf and hard of hearing needs as well. It's not only physical, but we have other needs and options for accessibility. So everyone just needs to be really made aware.
That's so true, Justin. Thank you for that. I see that we're over time now, and, oh, John is raising his hand. Go ahead, John.
I noticed many students are here.
And they're talking about what's best for them. But they don't necessarily know everything that's available in terms of accessibility. And sometimes they suffer because they don't know. So when you tell them you can do this, they're quite surprised to hear this, and they tell you how unaware of things they are. And it's really great when they find this information out.
Okay, I put the, I'm putting a link to the post survey in case anybody has to run. I think some of us, most of us are still here. This has been a great conversation, but we are way over, and we didn't anticipate as many of you as, even though we're delighted that you're all here. Too bad we only was set to 45 minutes, and apologies for the beginning, trying to put everybody into rooms. There was a lot to tackle. Anybody else has anything else to say?
I do. I would love to continue not just this conversation, but also some actions and activities as a group, because I think that we are building a movement here at LaGuardia, and some of us have been trying in our different ways. And Astrid, I'm looking at you for a long time, and John, many of us, to do this work. So I would love it if we can keep communicating, keep connected, learn from each other, support each other, and do this work, build awareness of ableism and how there is a lack of visibility and understanding so often, unfortunately. But all of us have a lot to learn. None of us know everything about issues of access, but this is social justice. This is a right that everyone should have to have a good workplace, a good learning environment, to have access to all the materials that we need to learn, study, teach, and do our jobs, and have a respectful environment where every single person is welcome. That's my goal, to try to help build that, and I want to do that with all of you. So I just hope that we can continue, and if you're interested in continuing, give us your name, your email, and we'll keep in touch and keep building on this. And thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah, if you want to be part of this movement, yeah, that sounds weird. If you want to be part of this movement, just go onto that Google Doc and put your name, your email address, any kind of contact, and we'd love to hear from you.
All right, Priscilla, I'm going to do that now, just for you.
Yay, Astrid, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for coming. Thank you all for coming, everybody. Deshauna, wait, did you want to say something?
I actually put my comment in the chat that as a faculty, I wish there would be more opportunities and somehow a mechanism for somebody from accessibility office always meet together as a trio, right? The accessibility office, student, and faculty to discuss, or to kind of provide more support for not only for students but also for faculty, because often those interactions happen either between the office and student or between office and right. So it always does in diets, but not all three parts. I know that the accessibility office has very limited funding and opportunities, but that's kind of my dream, that's how it could be done. And again, thank you for coming. And yeah, I hope this is just start of continuous efforts and movement, as Priscilla said.
And thank you, Sarah and Susan, for your interpreting.
Yes. Thank you to the interpreters and for all of you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Soon.
Bye-bye.